Just before I get into what I'm going to talk about today, I'd like you all to look at this spinning girl right here. Now, you either see her doing one of three things. She's either spinning clockwise, she's spinning counterclockwise, or if you're very good, you might be able to make her switch directions and spin both ways. So who's seeing her just going clockwise? Show of hands. That's about 20%. And counterclockwise? And who can make her go both ways? So just a few. That's about right. That's usually about the national average of how that plays out. Now, the point I want to make is that you're not in control of how you're processing information. And it's driving some of you crazy right now that other people see her going the other way, and you can't make her do that. You can stare at her for hours. I've stared at her for 20 hours. If you can't do it, you just can't do it. It's just a thing. And people have hypothesized that if you see her going clockwise, you're more emotional. If you see her going counterclockwise, you're more rational. And that's actually not totally true. It's just from the website where they actually have her spinning. If you want to find her, if you Google spinning girl, you will find her, and you can stare at her for as long as you like. But again, the point I want to make is that people, humans, are not in control of the way we process information. So as researchers, we need to take that into account. So I'm CEO and founder of Hotspex. We have the great pleasure of working with a lot of big global companies with large research budgets to actually invest in co-creation of new research methodologies with us at Hotspex. They let us know what their challenges are, and they've got actually funds to devote against us doing our own internal R&D. And that's actually what I'm going to show you today is some of that. If you came to the rock, paper, scissors contest last night, show of hands, who was at the rock, paper, scissors contest last night? Fantastic. Was it fun? Yeah? Fantastic. I showed this gentleman, his name is Eric Kandel, and he actually won a Nobel Prize for his work on sea slugs. And what he did with sea slugs, he actually figured out how memory is embedded at the cellular level within all living creatures. And the way a memory is embedded is actually through the channel of emotion. And a lot of interesting new research methodologies and marketing theories have been based on Eric's work over the last 7 years. And we found that very interesting when he won this prize, and we tried to figure out how to layer into that. I thought I'd actually show a little bit more pornography for you today, Lenny, because it's late in the session. So this is got to have a balance between male and female. It can't be one-sided. So this is actually Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. And why I'm showing him is because if you think about what we are, we're actually a collection of about 60 trillion cells. And the way our cells actually talk to each other are through the molecules of emotion. It's actually, cells actually need to speak to each other to actually perform our bodily functions. So if you're feeling love, it's actually something called oxytocin that's flowing through your body, and depending on the type of cell that it flows into, that cell will do something different. If it's a woman, it'll actually cause you to go in labor if it's time, or lactate if you look at your child. If you're a man, it actually causes you to be monogamous. If you're interested in this, I strongly encourage you to actually read this book called The Molecules of Emotion. It's fascinating. It's about a woman who actually worked on a Nobel Prize-winning team, and she really understood how molecules drive all our behavior. So that's a little bit too scientific and a little bit not accessible, really, for the marketing community. What is much more accessible is this metaphor here. And this is actually from the cover of this great book called The Happiness Hypothesis. I met this guy just before he went on the stage, actually, at the TED conference about 4 years ago. And this guy, Dr. Jonathan Haidt, really studied over 4 years why we do the things that we do. So he looked at religion, he looked at philosophy, he looked at biology, he looked at psychology, and he came up with this very interesting metaphor of a rider and an elephant. The elephant in this metaphor actually represents our emotional brain. It's actually our limbic system. It's about this big, the size of a fist, it's connected directly to your brainstem, and it's actually where our emotions actually reside. The rider is actually our cortex, and sort of the much bigger part of our brain sort of sits over top of it. Now, our emotional brain, or our elephant, if you will, serves a lot of very important roles. First thing it does is it actually causes you to figure out what to focus on. So I can see I'm actually pretty happy. I got a lot of you emotionally engaged right now because of the pornography. So you're focused on me, and it's your elephant or your emotional brain deciding that you're actually going to listen to me and actually pay attention. So great brands, products, ads, surveys need to capture people emotionally, and they're not even going to pay attention. The next thing it does is it actually decides what we're going to remember. So who remembers their first kiss? Show of hands, don't be shy. Hopefully you've all had a kiss in your life at some point. So it was a long time ago, right? And the reason why you remember it is because your elephant did that to you. When you experience a powerful emotion like your first kiss, something called neural growth hormone is released in your brain and in your cells and causes that memory to be wired into you, and it becomes actually part of you. So again, if you're going to be successful as a marketer, you must leverage emotion, because if you can't get remembered in your brands and products and advertising, you can't get bought. And then the most important thing that our elephant does for us is it actually sets everything into action. So every single thing that a human being does, and Eric Kandel actually helped prove this as part of his Nobel Prize, starts with a subconscious emotional urge to do it, and then our rider or our rational brain is later recruited to either allow or deny it. So there's no free will, there's only free won't. Now, why this is such a good metaphor is because if an elephant wants something badly enough, like a great new pair of shoes, or a very expensive new car, or 5 pieces of chocolate cake here today when probably you should be having a glass of ice water, there's no way that a small little rider can actually stop an elephant that wants something badly enough. So we, as part of a mission that we're doing with our clients, typically big CPG companies, we actually set out to quantify that, to actually make sense of that so we can understand the weight of emotion and rationality in a quantitative way across a number of different categories. We started out, we looked at about 101 different brands with over 21,000 different respondents, and we figured that on average, it's about 50-50 rational and emotional in terms of what the actual drivers are that drive purchase and loyalty. Found that in the vitamin category, for example, it's about 70% rational, 30% emotional. And you consider toothpaste, it's about 50-50. So 50% of the reason why somebody chooses Crest versus Colgate at retail and becomes a loyal user of that brand has to do with emotions. We actually at Hotspex, I'll show you how we do it, we measure 96 different core emotions. It's those emotions that actually make up 50% of the equation. So if you're just looking at rational stuff, you're almost missing half of what's driving a category. Perhaps most interestingly is when we did work on smartphones. Now you'd think it's all about security and battery life and usability and does it work in global places. It's all about that rational, functional stuff. But in fact, almost 70% of what drives a smartphone purchase decision is actually emotional in nature. It's why Apple is doing so well right now and why BlackBerry is actually suffering so badly. Because Apple gets this. If you watch an Apple TV commercial, they're not talking about all the device features. They're actually showing how it's embedded in your life and creates these very interesting emotional experiences. So we've done a lot of R&D that I'm actually sharing with you here today. So we've done thousands of hours of desk research with our R&D team. And again, we're very happy to get the support of our clients to actually have the budget to invest in this stuff. Done over 821,000 interviews with North American consumers to build the model so we can actually figure out which emotions to measure, how to measure them, and how to do it in a way that we could actually be predictive. And our model now actually predicts behavior with a 0.92 correlation. So we've figured out that if you take out the emotional part of our model and just look at the rational part, it's only about 70% predictive of what somebody's going to do. But because of what I've said just before about emotions playing such a role in driving behavior, when you add in the emotional layer, you get much more predictive. So how do we do it? It's not great that you can see that color there, but if you sort of look at this color, and I sort of asked what color it was, you'd come up with something. You might say it was purple. But if I give you a color swatch to compare the color you just saw against, you can tell me exactly what color it was. You'll say it's quadrisyndrome crimson series number 7. And you'll all agree that that's the same color, unless you're colorblind, of course. And why that's interesting is because the idea is if you give people the right tools to tell you what they're seeing, they can do a very good job of it. The same is true with emotions. So you can create an emotional identikit to help people understand about those chemical reactions that are happening in their body so they can verbalize it, they can all do it, and they can all do it very well. So we started out with about 5,000 different emotional words that we sort of gathered throughout the internet and through different forms of media. And we actually boiled that list down to a more manageable list of 96. Can't ask someone which of these 5,000 emotions do you feel about your smartphone or your toothpaste. It would just be far too abusive in any survey process. So we got to this list of 96 that we actually found to be highly predictive. And then what we did is we actually mapped those using something called 3D multidimensional scaling to sort of figure out how all these emotions relate to each other so you can bring it back into a context that marketers can actually work with to actually grow their brands. So you can see from the globe, we actually flatten it, and then our most interesting discovery was actually this. We call this our emoji sphere. So these are 96 core emotions, and what's interesting about it is this actually is a big part of what drives behavior. Now I want to draw your attention to this circle in the middle, sort of the core positive emotions. Connection, optimistic, trust, satisfied, happy, warm, pleasure, liking, love. These are the emotions that you feel about all your favorite people, your favorite brands, your favorite food. This is your body, your elephant addicting you to do this stuff. And so any great successful product or brand actually has to capture those emotions or they just can't work. I'm actually going to show you a food example later on using mobile devices. And food typically pulls over into this gray area over here, sort of the familiar territory. And that's an interesting place for food. Beer tends to sort of be over here. Smartphones are more up in the upper territory up here. Now, an important thing I want to note is that you get away from these center core emotions, you end up with to the negative emotions. And negative emotions are 2.9 times more powerful than positive emotions in terms of driving our behavior. And the reason why that is because our elephants are very slow to go into things and new relationships and new products and new experiences, and incredibly quick to withdraw themselves when they sense any sign of negativity or danger. So as brands and as marketers, and we tell our clients, the number one thing you've got to avoid is negative emotions. So to build your business, it's all about focusing on the core emotions, differentiating in a zone, and then eliminating negative emotions.